Hey there, fellow horse lovers. Welcome back to the Daily Ride podcast. I am very excited for today's episode. Andi Hauser is a hard woman to define, but in the most succinct terms, she is a Mustang rider, a cowgirl, an Emmy nominated former TV host, and a Jesus follower. I met Andi through Leadership Program of the Rockies, talking about our principles, which apply to our personal lives as well as in the political landscape and modern life. And she has always been such a treat to talk to and interact with. And when we discovered that we both have sassy younger mares, we became friends. And it's been a pleasure following Andi on social media since we have graduated Leadership Program of the Rockies, also known as LPR. And I am so thrilled to be able to share Andi with my audience on my podcast because she also has knowledge of meditation and had previously studied to become a meditation teacher. And her experience working with Hazel, this wild Mustang, has brought her a new level of awareness with presence and intention and fostering a deep, meaningful relationship with her horse, which has been a catalyst for transforming other relationships in her life as well. So please welcome Andi Hauser on the Daily Ride podcast. As always, the Daily Ride podcast supports True Heart Healing. True Heart Healing is my nonprofit foundation. Our mission is to leverage the healing power of equine partnership and the joy of equine companionship to support and empower children with disabilities and or life-altering illnesses, service members, veterans, and their families to build stabilizing relationships, facilitate learning and personal growth, find hope, and discover purpose. If this sounds like something that you're interested in, please head on over to www.the-daily-ride.com to check us out, learn more, and make a donation. Trueheart and I greatly appreciate your support. Well, Andi, it's so great to have you on the podcast. I have been so blessed to meet you and connect with you through our mutual involvement in LPR. And I've been really enjoying following you on Facebook over the last 2 years since we graduated LPR. But for listeners, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Morgan, for having me on the show. I knew shortly after we first met and connected, I was like, oh, yeah, she's a good one. We're going to be friends. I spent 20 years in broadcasting. And by that, I mean, I was on the air Monday through Friday in most cases, and hosted a variety of like lifestyle programs, journalism background. Most recently, I worked in Washington, D.C., and then after 20 years in the industry, finally made parole, so don't hold that against me. I miss it sometimes, but I'm glad to be away from, the industry of broadcasting. And I moved to Colorado and purchased a ranch with my sister and brother-in-law. So finally, sometimes in life, you lead this whole other life just trying to get to what you were really born to do. So that's sort of my story in a nutshell. Grew up in the Southeast, came out here just about 4 years ago. And, my life changed the day I made that big decision to go ahead and get my own horse. And I think that's probably why we're talking today.
It is. What drew you to horses and specifically to Mustangs?
That's always a fun question. Everybody has that story from that first interaction. And I was discussing with my mom today because we were just looking back. I always loved horses for whatever reason, inexplicable, right? Like I think many young girls are drawn to horses for whatever reason. But I remember I always just wanted to ride one. And about age 4.5 or 5, my dad finally took me. And it was just like a little camp pony, right? At this campsite, they had this little Morgan, this black Morgan mare, and her name was Queenie. And I remember getting up on her, and I just thought, my God, this is the best thing ever. I like, how have I lived 4.5 years and never been on a horse? Like the things that went through my mind were so familiar and so amazing. And that little mare is what got me into horses and in such an authentic and real way. And of course, she was the first one to run off with me. I remember my dad jumping on a quarter horse and running us down. And I was about 5. Stayed on, sticky then, sticky now. It's a blessing. But it was just something that I always loved horses, but I didn't always have the time. It came and it went when I had free time in my schedule. And it's kind of entered and exited. And I'm finally at a point in my life where I can say, horses are here to stay in my life. And I've got, the foundation and the means to continue with that. So it's interesting. Sometimes you have these passions and they kind of wane, but I will say it never really went away. It's just recently I've been able to really grab hold of it. And Mustangs are living legends. And that's how I looked at those horses and continue. The more my horse and I accomplish, the more I see that they're living legend. And we built this country on the Mustang, on those horses, that my horse would have come from the East Coast, most likely. Of course, those horses would have been brought over from Spain, but she would have been brought by the settlers. So, it's kind of a interesting dynamic when you start looking at her particulars. She's very cowy. She's a smaller buckskin, but Mustangs just always had a place in my heart. And I thought, man, when it comes time for me to get my own horse, not rent a horse, but buy a horse, I want to do something that's really going to challenge me and force me to grow. Well, let me tell you, that was the right decision. I have been forced.
Do you think that is in choosing a Mustang or choosing Hazel specifically?
I think it's a bit of both. I think choosing a Mustang, they're different than domesticated horses. And if you've been around a domesticated horse, one that, grew up on somebody, was born on a farm, raised on a farm, it's just different. Hazel was wild for 2.5 years before she was rounded up. So she had, that she had to cultivate that operate on her own, right? I mean, yeah, she's part of a herd, but also like food and water, that was up to them, and protection. So she's got that real different instinct. Her flight instinct is very heightened. And it is a lot of the time, which is really a big challenge. With, I think, Mustangs overall, they tend to be a little spooky. Not all, there's exceptions to the rule, but she's spooky, so we have to do a lot of groundwork before I even begin to get on her. And naturally, she's a mare, but she's kind of a tomboy. So you know what that's like. So she's marish with other horses, but she's very much kind of a gelding with the affection. And she comes when you call her a lot, which, there's nothing better than that, right? You want to win at the barn, call your horse, and it comes. Winning, like, what do you do? Cheat? You got candy in your pocket? Like, nope, that's not it.
Is that cheating though?
Good question, Morgan. I think no. They still either they want to come to you or they don't.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of how a lot of our bonds have started with our horses. At first, it's food, and then it's affection.
That's right. Well, people are the same way. I can be bought by food.
Yeah, I was gonna say dating.
Right. Come on, baby, buy me food and a drink, then we'll talk.
Yeah. So what was the first lesson that Hazel taught you early on in your journey together?
Just, man, be present, be fully aware. And I think a lot of us, when you are around a 900,000 pound, 1,200 pound animal, depending on how big your horse is, I mean, I think we do, like, as humans, we have that natural sort of awareness, like, things could go wrong. But Hazel in particular, I think there was a lot of intention that I established going in to work with her each time, even to this day. And it makes a difference. Horses are, as we know, they're sort of like barometers for where we are emotional, a very emotional spectrum, right? And she is no different than any other horse. And I tell you what, you get feedback. And I used to get feedback from her, like where she was like, stop touching me. Do not touch me. I do not want that. And you go, God, is it me? Well, yeah, it was me. You kind of, I've had to self-check and self-regulate more with that animal, but it has brought me I took meditation classes for years and even trained to be a meditation instructor, and I was for a while, but nothing brought me into the present like working with, a wild horse where you just don't know what could go wrong or what's going to spook them. Now, eventually, now I know, right? I pick her feet. Like, we have a tremendous relationship, but in the beginning, I was more heightened working with that horse. It was like handling a loaded gun. And I, don't mean that in a negative way. It's just I respected it every single time I got in the round pen with her. And
yeah, because she's so very present and aware that
man,
it requires you to be.
She misses nothing. And, horses do have, some of them more than others, but almost like a photographic memory. And, if I had one thing out of place at the barn, and I mean one thing, like let's say I moved the poop scoop, or off in the distance, she noticed there was now a truck parked. The things that she noticed made me very aware. And half the time now I see it before she does, unless we're talking about coyotes, then she can smell them. before I see them.
Mm,
Yeah, so it's been a good training just to be present, and I love that, and I think that's why. And Morgan, you can probably attest to this, and so can anybody else that owns a horse. I mean, 1 hour can turn into 3, and you don't
mhm,
know where the hell the time went because you're present. What time warp did I go down? Right? That's the beauty of being present. You're just fully
uh-huh.
engaged, and there aren't too many things we get to do that with in life.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's the presence, or I guess the awareness, the situational awareness. And then it sounds like she requires you to take that one step further and build that into, like you said, regulate yourself.
Yeah.
So if she's present and say it's a coyote and she's concerned about something, how do you then learn to, like, she gets concerned? Like you said, it's this huge animal. It's really hard to not also be concerned because suddenly they're spooky and they
Yeah.
could accidentally kill you.
Accidentally.
How do
Yeah.
you regulate yourself in that moment, knowing how potentially dangerous this could be?
And I think it's because I know how potentially dangerous it is. And, I mean, when she smells a coyote, there is almost no, and other Mustangs may be different. And I know some of them are because I have friends that have Mustangs and they do not react the way Hazel does. And it is just where I have got to, number one, is I have to acknowledge, like, okay, you see that. And then, I look where she looks and like it's a lot of nonverbal, like, okay, I see you're upset. I see where you're looking. And then the best thing I can do, because if I try to work her when she's like that, I mean, we're talking she'll rear, buck, kick. I mean, just goes crazy because she's so uncomfortable. There's nothing I can do in those moments to make her comfortable other than stop asking for a lot. I back off and we kind of move further up. And some people might be like, well, just make her work through it. There are things I will like make her work through, the trailer section of the barn's scary, right? But we'll go through there. But when you're talking this horse and her awareness and her fear of these predators, she's so in her head and reactive. Sometimes, as a good horse person, you just got to know when to like let it go a little bit and not
Uh-huh.
force it. So there are times where, and I'm a very determined person, I get something in my head and this is what we're going to do. But with her, sometimes I'm like, is it worth it? Is it
Yeah.
worth her getting hurt? Is it worth me getting hurt? Because she's out of control. No, it's not. Let's just, we can move further up the arena or we can just, put it off and do it the next day. And that's been really hard for me because once I start something, I'm not one to walk away. But sometimes the right thing to do is just let it go. That way nobody gets injured because,
Yeah.
she gets to that point where she will run you over.
Yeah.
Um, that is the only case where she's like that, but it's always with, predators and it's always those darn coyotes and they're everywhere.
Well, I mean, and I feel like that's valid. I think the other thing to consider is what that might do to your relationship. If she is trying to communicate to you, hey, I'm concerned about something, there's something that
Yeah.
could eat me, and
Yeah.
you're not listening,
Yeah. Right.
then what does that tell her? Like, oh, this person isn't going to pay attention to me when I'm actually scared.
Right. And she goes, well, okay, this, my handler, my owner, my mom doesn't care.
Uh-huh.
And then that's gonna damage, yeah. And, and there's people that would think very differently, and I realize that. But again, if you don't have the Mustang that's as reactive as she is to predators, you don't get it's just not worth it. Now, one day, we may be able to work through that because I've got a friend who works preserve coyotes, and she rides a Mustang in the play, and her Mustang does not react the way Hazel does, but it was also born in the wild. We could work through it, but we got other things right now that are more pressing. So you just kind of pick your battles. And I've learned really quickly with Hazel, not every single fight is worth it. I mean, she respects my space. She's good under saddle. She trailer loads. Pick your battle. That's not what I want
Uh-huh.
to pick right now. We'll get there, but we're
Yeah.
only 3.5 years into this.
Yeah. You got time. And
Yeah, we got
I
time.
commend your ability to recognize the difference between her reaction to, oh, this is a scary spot in the barn. Like,
Right.
okay, you can suck it up. We can deal with this versus, I think I might die. There's something that will eat me.
100% Morgan. And that's the state she goes into, just pure self-preservation and
Right.
wants me to look. Look, do you see? I'm looking
Uh-huh.
right at it. Do you see it? Acknowledge you see it. It's helped our relationship. And I felt so bad, Morgan. First time I didn't realize why she was freaking out so bad. I mean, and I was like, you're just being a butt. You're just not working with me. You're not listening. You're being belligerent. I know. How can a horse be belligerent? Well, trust me, she was being
You can.
belligerent. Yeah. And I took her to the round pen and we did, we lunged and I'm just like round pinned her, tried to wear her down. Well, here's the thing. Every session with that horse I record.
Mm.
So I had left the camera running in the big arena when I took her to the round pen. And when
Mm.
we came back and I looked through the camera, just because I was like, oh my gosh, I left that running. Well, what did I see? Two big coyotes. We hadn't been gone from the arena 5 minutes when those suckers
Wow.
showed up. And I was like, I'm like, Hazel, I am honest to God, Morgan, I apologize to the horse. I said, I am sorry, honey. They were right there. And I didn't see them, and you were trying to tell me they're right underfoot. And they were. And they were. We got them on video. So anyway, so after that, I learned my lesson. I was like, well, I should listen to this horse once in a while. She's smarter than me in some cases.
Yeah, and she called you out on that.
She
So
did.
you mentioned like your body language. So she alerts to something. You make a big deal of showing her that you're looking where she's looking.
I,
So
I
she
let her
can
know.
notice you noticing her.
Yeah. Isn't that
Um,
weird?
yeah.
I
Do you
do.
notice me noticing this, noticing that?
Well, I know it's so strange, but I do because I've never done this with a horse before. And I'm like, she's going to fixate on it. So I kind of look at her, I touch her, and then I look where she's looking. I look back and I look at her. And then I'm like, okay, let's go. Like I've
And that makes a
acknowledged,
difference to her?
let's go. Yes. I'm like, come on,
Wow.
let's go. Come on.
Okay.
You see, I see it. And we're okay.
So does that like do you feel a difference in her energy, or then do you try and I guess communicate that she's okay and you can move forward with your energy, your breathing? How does that work?
I do check my breathing with her a lot. And I check, you know what's funny? I check where my shoulders are. And I don't know if she can tell if my shoulders are up by my ears or not, but I check my shoulders a lot after something like that. And I
Hmm.
just like, check where my leg pressure is. I'm like, we're loose. I'm like, it's okay. You're good. You're good. You're good. And just pat her on the neck and we move on. But there's something about her. And I know this sounds crazy, but it's like, I need to acknowledge where she is.
Uh,
And then she's normally willing to let me kind of get her past it,
yeah.
depending on the degree of intensity for her.
Yeah.
So it's,
She needs that attunement of getting on the same page or knowing that you're willing to see what page she's on.
you know what? That's a great way to describe it. It's attunement. That's what she needs. And I've never been around a horse like that. Most of the horses I grew up riding were very much like, no, we're doing this and just do it. And maybe that was
Right.
part of me and being youthful and
Uh,
arrogant and thinking I knew everything and not listening to the animal. So maybe at 45, I'm like, well, I'm going to listen to the animal. I don't know. Maybe I grew up a little bit, Morgan.
do you find that this idea of being present and mindful and attuning in this relationship with Hazel has translated to the rest of your life?
Yeah, oddly enough, as a journalist, I will say I had to work to develop things like empathy. It didn't come naturally to me, which is probably why I was a good journalist, honestly, for a number of years. I could do things that were a little bit appalling, right? Like go knock on somebody's door after their son was shot in the front yard, right? So I had to work really hard to try and understand how other people might be feeling in a situation. I mean, it didn't mean I didn't care. It just like I struggled to empathize. And then, over the last few years, as you get older, you have more life experiences, you sort of realize how important empathy is. And then I think when I got this horse, I think if I didn't sort of empathize with her, and granted, I make her do things she didn't want to do all the time. But if I didn't try to understand where she was coming from and why she was coming from that place, we weren't going to get anywhere. I mean, because she's a horse, I tell you what, if you don't give her a good reason to do something, she's not going to do it.
Yep.
And
I know
if you
what
don't,
that's
right,
like.
you do. I know you
Yep.
do.
Yep.
I know you do. And it's like, and if you don't show them you're trying to understand, this is a
But
horse that she's got no use for you. Right. Right. And it really, this is the first real, I'm like, wow, this is really a two-way street. And how in the hell is this happening with a 1,000-pound animal right now? But it was.
uh,
And, I got a lot to learn, I think, with people still. But I'm getting there with horses. And I think it's because maybe it's a little more life and death. I don't know because they're 1,000 pounds,
yeah.
but it's been an awakening for me. And sometimes I think, gosh, if I could have empathized a little bit earlier, a little bit sooner, if I could have understood emotions a little bit better, I might have gotten further ahead in life, right? But it's not how God works, and that's not how life works. But I do believe every animal that we encounter, and people too, I think it's ordained, and I think that for whatever reason, God goes, well, we're going to give this, tough journalist that struggles with emotions a really emotional and smart horse, but an animal that needs to be heard and understood. And you're either
Mm.
going to do it and you're going to move on and have a wonderful relationship with this animal, or you're just going to be like, well, you know, go get something else. Go get a fish. Horses aren't for you.
I don't know if I've actually spoken about this at length on the podcast. I sometimes wonder if God doesn't know how skeptical I am. And so he kind of creates these scenarios that I can't ignore. Like I thought when I first got True that I got way too much horse and then I'd made a
Yeah.
terrible mistake and she was going to be too much for me. My middle name, Arlene, the meaning is truth. And part of True's regular registered name is True. True Truckle, which means a wheel of cheese. Super random. But then I'm like, okay, but what if that's a coincidence? So on one of her sides, she's got waves and they are white. And Morgan means white sea. And so
Ooh.
there's this moment where my mom looked at me and she's like, I think this was the lighted runways straight to this horse that like your name is literally on her side. Her
Wow.
registered name is also your name. Like she was meant for you.
Yes.
I was feeling super overwhelmed. And so I think I needed to hear that. But in your case, I wonder if this is a God thing being like, she's so headstrong.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make her learn this lesson with a 1,000-pound animal that's going to be a lot harder to ignore.
I think you're right. No, I mean, I think you're right. And I think when you can step back, like you did with True, and sort of take it all in, you can live day to day and not give it a whole lot of thought, right? Or you can
Mhm.
kind of like look for meaning. And I'll tell you, and if you want to take the time to look for meaning, it is there. And, God will show you. And I think like this Mustang, I think part of it was like, man, you're going to go through some hard trials. Like he's going to be blood, sweat, and tears. And there were same time, Morgan, there were times I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing with, this Mustang? I have no business. Like I was a good rider, but my God, being a good rider does not translate into being a good trainer and a good handler.
Mhm.
You have to rise to that occasion, right? You
Mhm.
educate or you don't.
Mhm.
So, and I think it was God's way of saying, you know what, you're going to have some free time on your hands and you are going to get to the next level in life. And it's going to include being able to saddle and ride and enjoy this living legend. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
that, believe me, there were times I cried and I was like, I got to get rid of her. I can't do this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, you're going to get rid of a horse that you named after your great grandma? Wow, quitter.
So that's what Hazel Fern is after, your great grandmother?
Hazel Fern, yes, is named
That's
after.
amazing.
Isn't that a hoot? So I knew my great grandmother. Had a great relationship with her, Hazel Fern. So Hazel Fern Ford, and they lived in Ohio, and they were dairy farmers and raised turkeys as well. And she had that dark hair with lots of gray in it. She was sassy little thing, and I just thought, man, that's a good name, Hazel Fern. And then when I got the horse and I spent some time with her, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna name her after my great grandmother. So I did, yeah. That's always
It suits her.
it does. Well, right? Yeah, it does. And she's got that really fluffy, that really thick Mustang mane, and then she's got
Mhm.
the frosting on top. So just like my grandma, great grandma.
She's got a great mane and tail. Also, I love her dappling. Seems like every summer you end up posting some videos on buckskins are so pretty.
Shoot, she is. Yeah, she really blooms in the summer, and we're right
Yeah.
there. Like another month or two, and she's gonna really, yeah, be gorgeous. She's put on some weight right now, but I guess we all have this winter. And
Right.
I think it's that Mustang metabolism. Because, but anyway,
Fat on air. Yeah.
yeah, she get a little thick. I'm like, girl, you like riding a 45-gallon barrel.
So that's interesting. I'd imagine for her, not just the diet becoming domesticated. You said she was captured when she was about 2.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yes.
was the like trust building process like with her?
Yeah, she was captured when she was 2. We think she was in holding about a year, maybe a
Oh,
little bit less. A friend of mine, well, who's now a very good friend, a woman, and she picked her up at a storefront in Illinois, took her back to her farm, tip training for 6 to 7 weeks, right? So tip training is like for the Mustangs, it's basics. It's just basics. Like being able to halter and lead, being able to pick up their hooves and clean their hooves, trailer load them. And I think that's kind of it. If
uh,
they can do that, they're tip trained, right? It's minimal, very minimal. Now, Kathy took it a little bit further, but it was funny. I saw Hazel, and I'll get to answering your question, but it's funny. It's another God moment when God winks, right? By Squire
mhm.
Rushnell, if you've read that book. But it was another God wink. I reached out to Kathy because I just love the description of this horse. I was like, man, and she's beautiful too. And I said, well, I'd like to, put my name down to be considered to get this horse for $125. This is what Hazel was, by the way,
Oh,
$125.
wow.
Yeah, bargain, right?
Right.
$125. And I said, wow, so I'd really like this horse. And she goes, well, she's already spoken for. But there was something in the back of my mind, right? And I just said, oh, well, if anything changes, please call me. And I let it go. And I said a prayer that night. And I said, God, if this is my horse, I'm going to let it go right now, but bring her to me. Well, little did I know, not long after that, Kathy had said the same prayer. She goes, God, help me find the owner for this horse, the right person for this animal. And then she said, well, it wasn't long after that, she woke up and she realized who she promised the horse to wasn't the right fit. And she's like, forget it. Nope, I'm making the right decision for this animal. And she called me. She goes, do you want to
Mm.
fly out and meet this animal? I said, I do. So I flew out a week later, drove to her beautiful, beautiful farm and interacted with this horse. And she goes, well, you want her? I said, yeah. She goes, well, I'll drive her out with my husband in about 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So here I am. I got a horse that's been tip trained by one, honest to God, Kathy's much more than a tip trainer. She's an incredible horseman on, in her own and, you know, amazing woman of faith on top of it. And she brought her out. And I remember took a while just to, you know, with horses, when you pet them, you kind of like touch their ears and kind of run your head. She didn't want me touching her ears. She would jerk away. She didn't want me touching anywhere near her eyes, jerk away. I mean, just, and I was like, man, okay, that's all right. It's all right. We're not in a hurry. And then I don't remember when it happened, maybe 2 months after I had her at my ranch. And I just remember one day I just touched her ear and nothing happened. She just stayed there.
Hmm.
And I remember, my gosh, okay, we're making progress. Now, we had already done like basic groundwork and just little things, but she still, it took probably 3 months before I could like touch her face the way I wanted to. And she
Hmm.
allowed it. And it took probably 3 months for her to want to take a cookie out
Oh
of my
my
hand.
gosh.
Yeah, she didn't want those cookies. She sure as hell didn't want an apple, I'll tell you that.
Interesting.
Yes, it took, you know, she just didn't like, I don't want this. Finally, I remember the first time she took a cookie, I have it on video, and I was like, oh my gosh, finally. But I'm going to say that stuff took probably 2, 3 months, just little things. And, you know, she made you work for it. That horse doesn't give you anything.
That you don't earn. Yeah.
Exactly right. You have to earn it. That's right. And trailer loading was a nightmare, but you know, we just had fun today and she just got on the trailer by herself 3 times and backed herself off. And I'm like, how far we have come, Hazel.
Wow. Yeah, True and I are still working on that. I'm working on getting the third foot on the ramp.
Morgan, I know what that's like. I mean, it is
Oh,
so demoralizing. You're like, what's wrong with me?
yeah. I feel like an angry mom shouting at her kids to just get in the car.
Just get on, put your seatbelt on.
And she's looking at me like, I will not.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, and True, I think True and Hazel probably have some similarities in a way. Like Hazel, she'll take a suggestion, but she's not a horse where you can force her to do anything. Nothing.
Yep.
Forget it.
Yep.
Game over. Shut down. Walk away. We're done. But today I was just like, you know, I was like, come on, just and I didn't even put any pressure on the line. You know, you just kind of stand there. She knows the expectation. It's her
Right.
decision at that moment. I'm like, okay, we're not in a hurry. I'm not going to fight you. Do you want to get on? And she just hopped right on. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
I'm going to try that. True's very
Yeah.
sensitive to intentions too. But
Mhm.
she's also like, does not react well to pressure. Anytime someone gets behind her to shoo her forward with a crop or something, she's more likely to fight you over that than move forward.
Yeah.
And so I like what you said. Just ask. Like, she knows the expectation, but don't need to pull on her or anything. Let
No.
her choose if she wants to comply.
And that's, yeah. And that's an interesting spot to be in, especially I think for women like you and I. You and I have some similarities, I think, with our personality. And it's like, you know, we decide we're going to do something, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
This just doesn't work
Yeah,
always.
quit being silly.
Yeah.
Get in the trailer.
Mm-hmm. Right? I'm out of patience. Let's go. Yeah, but it was funny, man. We just walked right up there. And normally for her to get on, it's a 5 to 10 minute, but something in the air today. I was like, let's just go try. And I did. I stood in there and I left a slack line and she knew what I wanted. And she just popped
Huh.
right up. So, but then I put a little bit of pressure on the second time just to see. She pulled her head up, walked back, and just was like, no, we're not doing it this way. You're asking, I'm going to do it on my own. So weird, Morgan. Like, I'm like, how do their brains work like that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, how are they
Yep.
that in tune and that smart.
Yep. Because there's a difference. Even though you're doing the same thing over and over, the way you ask matters.
Yeah,
Have
it
you
was wild.
found that that has influenced your interactions with people?
Yeah, I tell you, it has. I've kinda gotten to the point where I was someone I felt like I needed to, like, control the situations a lot or get a certain
Mm.
reaction out of people, and it's so funny you asked that because, yeah, I think I try to more or less be like, "Well, I've done my part. What do you wanna do?"
Yeah.
I oversee, I'm a manager, marketing operations manager. And, there was things I'd feel like I'd be so adamant about and kind of forceful with. I mean, that was a lot of my television career. And I go, I don't always want to be the bull in the china shop. I can be, but I don't necessarily want to be. And I think, working with this horse, realizing that pressure and demanding just doesn't always work. There's situations where it does, but it doesn't always work. And I think in life, I'm like, well, God, if this works on a horse, maybe I ought to back off people a little bit, give them some
Mm.
guidance,
Mm.
but also trust that they know what they need to do. And let's just see if they can get it. I don't know. I've become less, my expectations are different. I've become less demanding. We still get the job done. I just don't need to be standing there with a handy stick to whack them.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'd imagine that that's kind of a pattern that was prevailing in journalism where you're the one asking the hardball questions, you're the one pursuing and guiding the conversation like that
Yes,
versus it sounds like Hazel specifically needs you to provide the guidance and set the expectation, but then back off and let her choose it.
I think you're right. I think that's a very astute observation. I think you're 100% right, Morgan. I think that you're right. I was so used to driving conversations and relationships and um, dialogues. You just kind of realize like, okay, you don't always have to be that person. You don't always have to be that person. And I think that, working with a really highly sensitive animal, I realized like, man, I can back off a little bit. Sometimes less is more. And I hate
Mm.
cliches, but I tell you, that's a really applicable cliche to everything. And it took a wild horse to teach me that less sometimes is more. She knows what I'm asking. I don't have to stand there and, does she get, once in a while, I ask her to canter when we're doing round penning and she doesn't do it. Okay, well, I'll snap the handy stick close to her butt and it doesn't work. Okay, well, we'll get a little light contact, but it's like, we don't go right for the hard stuff. Let's try to have a gentle conversation and see how that
Yeah.
goes. So I don't know. It's so funny. You just wouldn't think so I guess it's been about 3.5 years. You wouldn't think something has changed that much. But I think she's made me a softer, better person because that's what she wants to work with. And either I rise to the occasion and be that, or she doesn't want to work with me.
Do you find that when you're not soft with her, she calls you out on that
Oh,
too?
hell yes.
What does that look like?
Sass. Straight up sass. She will fling her head, I mean, almost shaking. Don't you ever do that again to me. I mean, it's just like, are you, am I having a conversation? Like, it is all nonverbal, but she
Uh-huh.
will shake her head at me like, how dare you? I mean,
The faces. I love the faces they pull.
my God. Morgan, I have never, I mean, I'm just like, okay, I'm sorry. Let's try again. I mean, I don't even know. Sometimes I don't even know what the right reaction is. I'm like, I don't even know with you. But yeah,
I'll fix my tone.
yeah, I'm sorry. That was rude. I can tell you, but not be rude. I understand. I know I probably sound like a crazy person right now talking about this horse, but it's like, it's all real. Like it is what we deal with. But, and she's one of those too, you cannot stop writing. Like the
Mm.
minute my mind, and this goes back to being very present, the minute my mind goes somewhere else, she knows it. If I look down at my phone, I'm like, oh, did my mom call? Did I text my mom? This horse will just stop. She's like, you're not paying attention. We're not going. So she's kind of like a dirt bike. I laugh. I was like, oh, it's my fuzzy dirt bike. Like you always have to be aware of, the clutch and the gas, and you've always got to be working both.
Mhm. Yeah.
Otherwise, she will just dead stop. Yeah, she don't care. She.
What a great masterclass in boundaries too. It's almost like she's like, this is my time. My time is valuable. If you're not paying attention, then why should I?
Exactly. Put your phone down and look,
Right. Right.
yes, Morgan. I mean, I know people listen to this and gonna be like, Andi Hauser's batshit crazy. But I mean, it's all stuff that we have just experienced. And it is a master class with her. And it truly has honed skills that I didn't even know that I needed or lacked. And it is, be fully present. And half time people are like, "Oh, I tried to call you." I'm like, "Well, I didn't have my phone out. I was with the horse for 2 hours." And yeah, well, actually, it's going on 3 now. But that's the beauty of it. That is the beauty of working with any horse if you want it to be. It doesn't even have to be a Mustang. Like, you can just totally immerse yourself in the communication, the nonverbal communication, and the feeling of an animal. And man, there is nothing that is one of the greatest gifts God gives us. And I wish everybody took advantage of it.
Thank you so much for joining Andy and I on today's episode of the Daily Ride podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please don't forget to rate and share this podcast with members of your herd. And please stay tuned for part 2 where Andy and I finish our conversation about horsemanship and her journey with Hazel Fern. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, enjoy the ride.